What happens when a weapons engineer from the 21st century wakes up in a medieval fantasy world and decides the mages never had a chance? Not because he has magic, because he has something they have never seen before, and they have no idea what is coming. 3 days before the fireballs light up the horizon, a young man named Aric opens his eyes in a blacksmith's workshop and does not recognize his own hands. Thin wrists, calluses on the knuckles, burnt scars across the fingers. Someone else's hands entirely. The man inside that body remembers a different pair, broad palms, a scar from a milling machine, a tattoo marking his unique number. Those hands belong to Nathan, a 35-year-old military engineer who spent his career designing artillery on a world called Earth. The last thing Nathan remembers is a testing ground, a jammed bolt, and a flash of white light that swallowed everything. Now there is only a wooden bench, stone walls, and the smell of sweat and smoke soaked into a rough blanket. He sits up, the world spins, his stomach revolts, and he vomits bow onto the earthen floor. The door opens, an old man rushes in, gray ponytail, leather apron, eyes red from 3 nights without sleep. He grabs the boy by the shoulders and speaks in a voice cracked with relief, saying the healer had already ordered the burial shroud prepared, but his son has come back. His son. Nathan closes his eyes and lets the stranger's memories flood in like cold water. Name, Aric, 22 years old. City of Haldren. Stepfather Hadrian, a blacksmith who took him in after his real father died. Mother gone in childbirth. Sister Mara, 3 years younger. A life spent at the anvil, making nails and horseshoes and dreaming of joining the blacksmith's guild. The guild charges 20 gold coins for entry. Aric does not have a single one. And in a world where 1 in 10 people is born with a spark of elemental magic, Aric was born with nothing at all. No fire, no water, no wind, empty. The people of Haldren have a word for it. They say it quietly, but always just loud enough to be heard. Dull. The shame of the dead blacksmith's family. That is what they call him. Hadrian presses a clay mug of herbal tea into his hands. Nathan swallows it, bitter and warm. The old man says Mara has gone for bread and will return soon. He tells him to lie still, to rest, that the fever has not fully broken. Then Hadrian leaves, and Nathan is alone with a foreign body, a foreign world, and 35 years of engineering knowledge that this world has never dreamed of. He does not panic. Engineers do not panic. Engineers gather data, calculate resources, and make a plan. He pulls himself to his feet, clinging to the wall, and crawls out into the yard. The light stings his eyes. He sees an anvil under a canopy, a water trough, a wood pile, and beyond the fence, the crooked street of a small town. And beyond the town, to the east, flashes of color rise above the hills, orange, blue, white, rising and falling like distant fireworks. Aric's memory supplies the answer, the mage's tournament. Once a season, the noble houses gather at Count Renaud's castle and entertain themselves with exhibition battles. Battle mages, knights in enchanted armor, sometimes dragons. The common folk watch from a distance and gasp at the spectacle. Nathan does not gasp. He counts the intervals between flashes and estimates the blast radius and measures the speed of projectile travel with the eye of a man who has spent a decade designing the things that end wars. Slow, he thinks, monstrously slow, like throwing torches compared to what he knows. He turns back to the workshop. He looks at the bellows, the hammers, the tongs, the sacks of coal in the corner, the iron billets stacked against the wall. Then he looks at Aric's calloused hands, which have been bending metal their entire lives. Then back at the horizon, where the aristocracy is flaunting its power. And for the first time since waking up in a stranger's body, he smiles. They play by their own rules. In this world, mages decide everything. By their rules, a dull apprentice with no spark and no coins has no future at all. But Nathan knows other rules. Rules this world has never heard of. He knows gunpowder. He knows ballistics. He designed artillery that ended wars on a planet these people will never see. Those fireballs on the horizon are beautiful, like lit arrows with backlights. Impressive to a crowd, nothing more to him. He walks back to the forge, sits down on the bench, and begins to remember a formula he has known for 20 years. 75 parts saltpeter, 15 parts coal, 10 parts sulfur. Coal is right there in the sacks by the furnace. Sulfur, blacksmiths keep for metalwork. He will ask Hadrian. Saltpeter, that one takes a moment. Then he remembers manure piles, old stones. a white crystalline coating that forms when organic matter seeps into limestone over decades. A tube takes shape in his mind. Iron walls no less than 5 millimeters thick, a priming hole on top, a wooden stock. First a wick lock, then a flintlock, and then he feels a gaze and looks up. A girl is standing in the yard, thin, dark braid, gray eyes, a basket of bread in her hands. Mara, the sister. She stares at him for a long time the way you look at someone who has returned from the wrong side of a door. Then she speaks quietly and says that his eyes are different. Nathan does not answer. He reaches into the basket and takes a piece of stale bread. It is the best food he has eaten in this life. The next 3 days, he does not leave the smithy. Hadrian believes his son is still recovering. Mara brings food and sets it silently by the door. Neither of them knows what is happening in the basement. Nathan is working. The first day is exploration. He searches every corner of the workshop and the cellar. The tools are crude but serviceable. Hammers in 3 sizes, pliers, chisels. A single file worn almost to its base. The forge runs on charcoal and produces enough heat to work soft iron. No steel smelting here. Steel is imported from guild blacksmiths in the capital. About 20 iron blanks sit in the corner, rods and strips of varying thickness. He picks one up and weighs it. Soft, not ideal, but enough for a prototype. Then he goes to the basement and finds something better than iron. The basement is at least 100 years old. Dark, damp, the walls beaded with moisture. People and livestock have lived above it for generations. And on those ancient stone walls, coating the surface in pale white crystal, is exactly what he was looking for. Potassium nitrate, saltpeter, not pure, laced with impurities, but enough for the first batch. He spends 3 hours scraping the walls with a knife into a clay bowl. For 100 grams of raw material, he dissolves it in hot water, strains it through cloth, evaporates the liquid. Fine white crystals remain at the bottom. He touches one to his tongue, bitter and salty. Saltpeter. The coal is already powder ground in a kitchen mortar. 2 hours of pounding until his fingers ache. That evening, he asks Hadrian about sulfur. The old man looks surprised, but shrugs and pulls a clay pot from under the workbench. Yellow lumps that smell of rotten eggs. Blacksmiths use sulfur for cementation. Here, it costs almost nothing. Nathan takes the pot to the basement. The next day, he begins mixing. The proportions are etched into him like a serial number. 75, 15, 10. He measures on a scale he fashions from a board and 2 identical stones. Accuracy of plus or minus 10%. For black powder, that is acceptable. He grinds the components together with a pestle, adding just enough water to make a paste. 40 minutes of unbroken work. Sweat drips from his forehead. On Earth, this is done by mills with bronze millstones. Here he has only his hands. Where the paste is uniform, he spreads it thin on a clay tile and sets it to dry near the furnace. Not too close. Wet gunpowder is safe. Dry gunpowder is not. By the evening of the second day, he has 50 grams of black powder. He pours a small amount onto the stone floor of the cellar, holds a burning splinter to it. A flash, bright white flame, a cloud of smoke, the sharp bite of sulfur, and burning in the air. Nathan stands in the smoke and stares at the black mark on the stone. The burn rate is slower than commercial powder. The granulation needs work, but it burns fast enough. On the third day, he turns to the barrel. He takes an iron rod as thick as his thumb, heats it to yellow, flattens it into a strip, and wraps it around a steel mandrel. 5 cycles of hammer and heat. The seam has to be airtight or the barrel will burst on the first shot. 6 cycles. He pulls the tube from the mandrel, rough, uneven, 30 centimeters long. Caliber roughly 15 millimeters. On Earth, it would be scrap. Here, it is the first firearm barrel in the history of an entire world. He smooths the bore with a file, drills a priming hole with an awl, carves a rough stock from a plank, and straps barrel to wood with leather and wire. No lock. For the first shot, he will use a smoldering cord held to the primer, just like the 14th century. On the evening of the third day, he stands in the blacksmith's yard. Hadrian has gone to the tavern. Mara is inside the house. The night is quiet. He loads 10 grams of powder, a wad of cloth, a lead ball cast in a mold that afternoon. He braces the stock against his shoulder, aims at the stone wall 5 paces away, brings the smoldering fuse to the primer. A hiss, a second's delay, and then a dull, dry pop, not a roar, not an explosion, and a cloud of gray smoke rolls across the yard. He walks to the wall and looks at what the ball left behind, a hole of fingers deep in solid stone, a wall a knight would spend half an hour hacking at with a sword. Nathan stands in the smoke and stares at the hole, and then he laughs, not with joy, not with malice, but with the quiet exhaustion of a man who has been walking toward a door for 3 days and has finally opened it. Mages are hurling fireballs across the horizon that bloom beautifully and terrify crowds. A blacksmith's apprentice has just punched his fingers into stone with a piece of lead and an iron pipe. No magic, no aristocratic blood, no blessing from any god. Saltpeter, coal, sulfur, iron, and physics. He turns toward the house and finds Mara standing in the doorway, eyes wide. Having seen everything, she asks in a low voice what that was. Nathan looks at her for a long moment. Then he tells her it is the future. Mara does not look away. She says she wants to know how it works. Nathan nods, and that is where everything truly begins. After the first shot, he does not sleep until dawn. He sits in the basement by the light of an oil lamp and draws. He draws with a stick on clay tablets because paper and Haldren costs a full day's wages. The first diagram is an improved barrel, longer, thicker walls, a proper priming shelf, the early design of a flintlock. The second is a saltpeter pit, layers of straw, manure, ash, urine, and lime, left for 6 months to crystallize into potassium nitrate. Earth had done this for centuries before anyone found a faster way. The third drawing is an arsenal, not a smithy, a factory. He stares at that third drawing for a long time. 1 musket means nothing. He needs 10, then 100, then 1,000. And for every barrel, he needs powder and bullets and trained hands and discipline. The weight of it settles over him like a stone slab. 1 man, no money, no connections, no magic. In a backwater town on the edge of a county no one has heard of. Mara comes in at dawn with bread and milk. She sits beside him and looks at the clay tablets in silence. Then she asks what saltpeter is. He explains it simply, a white crystal that forms when manure and urine break down against limestone. It burns quickly. Mix it with coal and sulfur, and you get a powder that turns to gas that instant it ignites. Trap the gas in a tube, and it pushes everything forward. She listens without interrupting. Then she asks a question that stops him cold. She asks if the powder could be made stronger by changing the size of the grains. Nathan stares at her. This 19-year-old girl from a blacksmith village has just asked about gunpowder granulation, the precise question that took European engineers 100 years to properly answer. He tells her yes, it is possible. Large grains burn slower and give more even pressure. Fine dust burns too fast and can rupture the barrel. The ideal grain size depends on the caliber and barrel length. She nods. She says she wants to help. He agrees immediately. He cannot do this alone, and he knows it. For the next 2 weeks, they work side by side, and Mara turns out to be something Nathan did not expect. She cannot read, but she understands through her hands and her eyes the way others understand. Through books. She watches how substances behave together. She memorizes it. She runs her own tests. She tries 3 different grinding methods and discovers that using alcohol instead of water produces denser, more uniform grains. Nathan knew this. Earth figured it out in the 17th century. Mara figures it out in a week through trial and error alone. He begins to teach her, not with formulas but with principles. Why some substances burn and others do not. Why metal softens in heat. Why steam takes up 1,000 times more space than water. She absorbs it the way dry earth absorbs rain. And there is no word for what she is doing in this world, but the word on earth would be science. By the end of the 2nd week, they have assembled 3 muskets, each one better than the last. The 2nd barrel is a hand's length longer, with thicker walls welded in 6 cycles instead of 5. The 3rd barrel is better still, and Nathan feels Aric's muscle memory begin to fuse with his own engineering precision in a way that neither alone could achieve. 20 years of a blacksmith's hands, a decade of an engineer's mind. Together, they are a weapon. Hadrian notices the smell first. One evening he goes down to the basement and finds 3 iron tubes on a workbench, bags of gray powder, lead balls in a clay bowl, and clay tablets covered in drawings no blacksmith in Haldren could interpret. He looks at Nathan for a long time, then says he has been smelling sulfur from the basement for a week, and that the neighbors have noticed too. Nathan realizes his error. He has been so absorbed in the work that he forgot about secrecy. In a town where everyone knows everyone, the smell of sulfur is not subtle. He tells Hadrian the truth, or most of it, not about the other world or the engineer inside his son's body. Just this: he has found a way to hurl objects without magic, without a bow, without a catapult, using only powder and an iron pipe. Hadrian says nothing. He asks to see. They go to the yard at night. Nathan loads the second musket. He aims at a log by the fence and fires. A pop, smoke. The bullet punches clean through the log and buries itself in the ground on the other side. Hadrian stands there looking at the hole in the wood. His hands are trembling. He says it is like magic. Nathan replies, "It is not magic, it is science. When you understand why something works and can repeat it exactly the same way every time, that is science. Magic is a gift given at birth to 1 in 10 people. Science belongs to anyone with a head and hands." Hadrian is quiet for a long time after that. Then he says one thing Nathan will not forget. He says that if the callused finds out what is in this basement, he will burn the smithy along with everyone inside, not out of malice, out of a sense of order, because blacksmiths are not supposed to have such things. Nathan knows the old man is right. He knew it before the first shot was fired. He tells Hadrian that is exactly why no one can see what is in the basement. Hadrian nods, and then he says that tomorrow he will board up the basement window and install a new door with a bolt. Nathan looks at the old man and for the first time in this world feels that he is not entirely alone. Hadrian does not understand what his adopted son has become, but he trusts him, and sometimes that is enough. The question of money comes next. Gunpowder requires materials: iron, lead, sulfur, saltpeter, tools. All of it costs money they do not have. Hadrian's smithy barely survives on horseshoes and nails. They need a source of income that draws no attention. Nathan looks at the tools in the workshop and finds the answer staring back at him: knives. He knows metallurgy that no blacksmith on this continent has ever heard of. Differential hardening, controlled carburization, precise tempering temperatures. He can make blades twice as sharp and 3 times as durable as anything sold in Haldren, and sell them legally in the open market like any ordinary craftsman who simply does his job exceptionally well. He spends the days on the first batch, 6 blades. He coats each one in a paste of coal dust and clay, seals them in a clay box, and holds them in the furnace at yellow heat for 4 hours. Carbon penetrates the iron surface and transforms it into steel. Then differential hardening, the cutting edge exposed to oil quench, the tank protected by thick clay, cooling slowly to stay resilient. The Japanese had made katana this way for 1,000 years. The result speaks immediately: a blade that cuts through hemp rope in a single stroke, that holds its edge twice as long as any knife at the market, that flexes on impact and refuses to break. Hadrian takes the first knife in his hands and is silent for a long time. Then he says that in 30 years at the forge, he has never seen work like this. He asks where Nathan learned it. Nathan says he had strange dreams during the fever. Hadrian does not believe him. He asks no more questions. At the Haldren market, the 6 knives sell out in 3 hours, each for a silver coin. An ordinary knife costs 5 copper. A silver coin is worth 50. A 10-fold markup, and people pay without hesitation. The butcher tests the blade on a pig carcass and pulls out his wallet. The leather worker checks it on his belt and buys 2. The grain merchant takes 3 for caravan security. 6 silver coins in a single day. Hadrian earns that in a full month. Nathan puts every coin back into materials. 20 pounds of iron from a merchant in the next town. 10 of lead from a potter who uses it for glaze. 3 pounds of sulfur from the apothecary. And Mara makes a discovery that changes the saltpeter supply entirely. She suggests checking the abandoned stables outside the city, where manure has accumulated for years and the walls are white with crystals. She is right. In one trip they collect the kilograms of raw saltpeter, more than Nathan scraped from the cellar walls in a week. A rhythm takes shape. Mornings, knives and tools for the market. Afternoons, Mara purifies saltpeter and prepares the powder mixture. Evenings, Nathan works on weapons in the basement. The 3rd musket, the 4th, the 5th, each one better than the last. By the 6th, he has mastered a primitive flintlock, a piece of flint and iron jaw striking a steel plate, sparks falling onto the powder shelf, ignition without a fuse. The time from trigger to shot drops from 3 seconds to 1.5. In battle, that difference is a man's life. By the end of the 2nd month, Nathan has 10 working flintlock muskets, all tested, all firing true. Effective range 50 paces, penetration through a 1-inch plank at 30. Chainmail at that distance would offer no protection. 10 muskets wrapped in oiled cloth in the cellar, and no one to fire them. A musket without a unit is just a stick. He needs soldiers, but he cannot hire them. In this kingdom, raising armed men is a privilege of nobles and mages. A peasant with an army is a rebel, and rebels are hanged. He thinks about this for 3 days, and the answer comes to him not from strategy, but from the street. From 5 young men, the people of Huldren, orphans, vagabonds, day laborers, boys with no family, no trade, no future. The kind found in every town, sleeping in barns, chased away from everywhere. The army will not take them because they cannot afford equipment. The guilds will not accept them because they have no master to vouch for them. They have nothing to lose. Nathan finds them behind the market, burning a bonfire and sharing stolen bread. 5 young men between 17 and 25, skinny and weary and angry at the world. He offers them work, food, shelter, silver pay. One condition, complete obedience and silence. The oldest one, named Davin, asks what kind of work. Nathan says they will find out once they agree. For agree immediately, Davin thinks for a minute, then he nods. The next morning, all 5 stand in the blacksmith yard and watch Nathan pull an iron pipe with a wooden stock out of the basement. He loads, aims at a wooden shield 50 paces away, fires, bangs smoke, a hole clean through the shield. One of them, a boy named Tor, drops to his knees. He is certain Nathan is a secret mage. Nathan says clearly, no magic, iron, gunpowder, lead, any of them can do this in a week. He places the musket in Davin's hands and shows him how to hold it, how to aim, when to pull the trigger. Davin fires, misses, his hands are shaking. Second shot, closer. Third, it hits. Davin lowers the musket and looks at Nathan with something burning in his eyes. He says that his whole life he has watched knights and mages decide who lives and who dies, and that this is the first time he has held something that puts him on equal ground with them. Nathan nods. Exactly. That is the goal. The 3rd month begins with discipline. Nathan knows from military history that weapons without tactics are useless. The Turkish Janissaries won not because their guns were better. They won because they stood in formation and fired on command. 5 men with muskets are not a squad. They are 5 individuals who will scatter at the first charge. He needs someone who knows how to turn men into a formation. Sergeant Corvin arrives in Huldren in the middle of the 3rd month, 38 years old, missing his left arm below the elbow, the stump wrapped in a leather strap, face scarred, eyes that have seen far too much death. 20 years in mercenary companies, 3 wars, 16 sieges, then a duel with a mage, a moment of bad judgment, and a fiery whip that took his arm at the elbow. Without the arm, his company discharged him. The Warriors Guild denied him a pension. He has been wandering the roads, drinking on his last coins. Nathan finds him at Huldren's tavern, drunk and coiled tight as a spring, ready to strike at anyone who looks at him wrong. Nathan sits across from him and orders food. Then he asks if Corvin knows what drill training is. Corvin laughs. He says he spent 20 years yelling at recruits to hold their shields straight. Nathan says he does not need shields. He needs someone to teach 5 men to stand in a line and not scatter and fire on command and reload and fire again. Corvin says it sounds like a crossbow firing line. Nathan says it is similar, but not quite the same. He takes Corvin to the smithy that night, shows him the musket, and fires at a target. Corvin does not flinch. He is a veteran. He has seen mages burn entire regiments. But he walks to the target and touches the hole with his finger, and something shifts in his eyes. He asks at what range it pierces chainmail. Nathan says 30 paces. Corvin is quiet for a moment. Then he speaks, almost to himself, 30 paces, chainmail pierced. Any peasant. No sword training, no strength, no magic, just aim and fire. He sits down on a barrel and stays silent for a long time. Then he says he agrees, and that he does not care about payment. He just wants to see it work in a real battle at least once. The next morning, Corvin takes the 5 young men and begins breaking them, not with cruelty, with system. Before dawn, formation, fallen, step forward on command, stop on command, about face, line into 2, 2 into 1. 5 hours of drill without weapons, then an hour with muskets, aim, fire, reload, on command, only on command. Anyone who fires early washes cauldrons for 3 days. The men groan. They complain. Davin throws his musket on the ground at one point and says he will not take orders from a one-armed old man. Corvin picks up the musket with one hand, hands it back, and says calmly that on the battlefield, whoever throws his weapon dies first. Davin takes the musket. He never throws it again. 2 weeks later, 5 former vagabonds are firing 3 volleys a minute in formation. First rank fires, second reloads, third prepares, first steps back, second steps forward and fires. Continuous fire. Not perfect. Misses, delays. But the formation holds. They do not scatter. Corvin knows his craft. And then, at the end of the 3rd month, the thing Nathan has been both hoping for and dreading arrives on its own. A gang of 12 armed bandits has been raiding villages west of Haldren for 6 months, looting, killing. Count Renaud's garrison of 10 guards sees no reason to chase them into the forest. The peasants complain. The peasants are ignored. Nathan hears about it from Mara, who hears it at the market. A farm 2 hours walk away was ransacked. The owner was killed, the livestock taken. That evening, he gathers his 5 men. Corvin stands nearby. Nathan says this is their first real battle, not targets, living people who will try to kill them. Anyone who wants to leave can leave now. No one leaves. They set out at dawn. 6 muskets, 5 for the marksmen, 1 for Nathan. They find the gang's camp by noon, a clearing in the forest. Huts of branches, a fire, horses tied to trees, 12 men with swords, axes, and 2 bows. Nathan positions the marksmen behind fallen trees at the clearing's edge, 40 paces out. Corvin whispers each man's sector. Nathan waits. His heart is pounding hard enough to hear in his ears. His hands are shaking. This is the first time in either of his lives that he is going to shoot at people. He clenches his jaw, raises his hand, drops it. 5 shots merge into almost one sound. Smoke billows over the tree line. Screams erupt from the clearing. 3 bandits go down at once. A 4th grabs his shoulder. The rest scramble to their feet, grabbing weapons, looking for an enemy they cannot find. Corvin counts aloud. Reload. Powder, wad, ball, rod, primer. 12 seconds. Second volley. 2 more fall. 1 runs into the trees. The rest follow into the forest, away from the smoke and the noise and the invisible death raining from the tree line. 3 minutes. The clearing is empty. 5 dead, 2 wounded. Nathan lowers his musket. His hands will not stop shaking. He steps behind a tree and throws up. Corvin comes to stand beside him. He says throwing up after your first battle is normal. Everyone does it. Then they stop. Nathan straightens, wipes his mouth, looks at the clearing. 5 bodies, blood on the grass, the smoke still drifting between the trees. He has killed people, for the first time in both of his lives. They walk back in silence. The men are pale. Tor carries his musket pointed at the ground and stares at nothing. Davin walks with his jaw clenched tight. Corvin brings up the rear. In Haldren, the news travels within a day. 6 unarmored men routed 12 armed bandits without losing a single fighter. No one understands how it happened. Whispers start. Some say Hadrian's son has dabbled in dark magic. Others say he found an ancient artifact. Nathan listens to the rumors and understands that the silence is ending. More victories mean more attention. More attention means the moment is coming when Count Renaud hears about the blacksmith's boy with the thunder rods. And when that happens, the Count will not send bandits. He will send knights. The Count's soldiers arrive in the 5th month before Nathan expected them. For horsemen in chainmail with the Renaud coat of arms on their cloaks ride into the yard while Nathan is at the forge. The senior officer dismounts and walks into the smithy, young, arrogant, one hand resting on his sword hilt. He says the Count has heard of a blacksmith from Haldren who makes unusual things, and the Count wants to know what kind of things. Nathan sets down his hammer. He has been expecting this. He says he makes knives, very good knives, the best in the county. If the Count wishes, he can supply a batch for the castle kitchen. The officer frowns. He says this is not about knives. People say the blacksmith's son summons thunder without magic and killed bandits in the forest with it. Nathan shrugs. People talk too much. He says they caught the bandits off guard. A standard ambush, bows and axes, no thunder. The officer does not believe him. It is obvious. But he has no orders to search the smithy, only to ask. He mounts and rides off. Nathan stands in the yard and watches them go. He has perhaps to weeks, perhaps a month before they return, and not with questions this time. He turns to Hadrian. The old man is white as chalk, hands trembling. Nathan tells him it is time to move the workshop. Mara had found the location weeks ago while searching for saltpeter, an abandoned copper mine in the hills north of Haldren. Old workings, dry, spacious, ventilated through the shafts, far from the roads, far from the Count's eyes. The move takes for nights, everything carried by hand along goat trails in the dark. Pipes, powder, tools, iron blanks, lead, sulfur. 15 men in a chain moving through the hills without torches. Corvin calls it a retreat. Nathan corrects him. Strategic redeployment. The mine is cold and damp and dark, and for the first week everyone freezes and curses in multiple languages. Then they adapt. Nathan assigns the tunnels by function. The main hall for forging, a side tunnel for powder production, the far hall for storage, quarters at the entrance. Corvin places a guard post with 2 men around the clock. A strict daily schedule takes hold. Morning roll call, production through the day, shooting practice in the far ravine at evening, night sessions for those who cannot read. Nathan teaches literacy not from compassion, but from necessity. A soldier must be able to read an order. By the 6th month, the unit has grown to 30 men. 15 more arrived from surrounding villages, drawn not by the rumor of thunder, but by the simpler rumor that there is a man in the hills who pays silver every week. For landless peasants, that is enough. Nathan meets each one personally, looks them in the eye, asks why they have come. Those who lie, he sends back. Those who tell the truth, he keeps. 30 marksmen, 20 muskets, powder enough for 300 shots. The saltpeter pits running at capacity, a workshop producing the barrels a week. More than Nathan dreamed of 4 months ago, a fraction of what is coming. Count Renaud sends the putative force in the 7th month. 50 soldiers and 1 mage. Not an archmage, a second circle battle mage, fire element, fireballs and a fire shield. For a peasant band, that ought to be more than sufficient. Nathan learns about them 2 days ahead. A boy named Wren, who once worked as a stable hand in Haldren, overhears messengers at the inn. 50 soldiers, a mage, orders to find and destroy the rebel band in the hills. Nathan calls a council in a cramped tunnel by lamplight. Corvin, Mara, Davin, the 4 of them bent over the map. Corvin says 50 trained soldiers is a different matter from bandits. Chain mail, shields, swords, and a mage. Nathan asks what a battle mage can do in the field. Corvin answers from his own memory. A second circle, fireball range 60 paces, 1 every 5 seconds, blast radius 3 paces. Fire shield blocks arrows and bolts. A spear can punch through, but only with momentum. Nathan does the arithmetic, 12 fireballs per minute, 3 pace radius. 1 or 2 casualties per hit if the formation is tight. Significant, but one mage cannot address 30 targets simultaneously, and a spread formation reduces the casualty rate sharply. The musket reaches 50 paces. If the mage closes to 60 to cast, he enters the kill zone. The only unknown is the shield. He asks Corvin whether anything pierces a fire shield. A heavy crossbow bolt, Corvin says, if it strikes the same spot twice. A lead ball is heavier and faster than a crossbow bolt. Nathan files that information away. He will test it in the battle itself. 3 days before the force arrives, Nathan chooses his ground. A narrow gorge half a league south of the mine, the only passable path through the hills. 200 paces long, 10 paces wide at the narrowest. Stone walls 3 men high on either side. He positions 15 marksmen on each ridge in a crossfire. Corvin objects, they might hit their own men. Nathan explains the angles. Left ridge fires down and right. Right ridge fires down and left. The trajectories diverge. With disciplined fire, friendly fire is geometrically impossible. Corvin stares at him for a long moment and says it is madness that might work. At the gorge's entrance, Nathan builds a barricade, fallen trees, rocks, ropes at horse-knee height. The same at the exit. Lure them in, block both ends, shoot from the flanks. He has read about this method in books on guerrilla warfare. It worked in jungles and mountain passes across centuries on Earth. The geometry of death does not change. He stands on the ridge the evening before, looking down into the quiet gorge, and thinks about the soldiers who will march into it following orders from a lord. They did not choose. He could retreat, deeper into the mountains, by another month, but they would send more each time. Running does not solve the problem. The only way to stop the Count is to make him pay a price he cannot ignore. Nathan opens his eyes. He has known this since the first shot. War is never clean. He knew that in his past life. Now he knows it in this one. The punitive force enters the gorge in the morning fog. 50 soldiers in pairs. The mage at the front beside the mounted commander. Nathan counts from the ridge, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, all inside. The lead patrol reaches the barricade at the far end and stops. Confusion ripples back through the column. Nathan raises his hand, then drops it. 30 muskets fire simultaneously from both ridges. The roar bounces off the stone walls and doubles, then doubles again, until it sounds like 100 guns. Smoke fills the gorge from floor to rim. Below, screams, the shriek of horses. The first volley drops 15 men. In a corridor 10 paces wide, there is nowhere to hide. A shield held overhead stops arrows. Bullets arrive from above and from both sides at once, and no shield covers everything. Second volley, 10 more fall. The mage reacts quickly. Nathan gives him that. He throws a fire dome over himself and the commander instantly, then launches fireballs blindly upward into the smoke toward the ridges. One strikes the rocks 5 paces from Nathan. Heat scorches his face. Stone shards open a cut on his arm. But a fireball aimed blind at smoke is not a precision weapon. Nathan calls this for best marksmen. Davin among them. Target, the fire dome. Concentrated volley. For shots, 3 ricochet off the dome. One finds a weakened point and punches through, striking the mage in the thigh. The mage screams, the dome flickers. Nathan orders a general volley, 30 muskets into the flickering shield. The dome collapses. The mage falls. The commander falls beside him. The battle is over. The remaining soldiers drop their weapons and raise their hands. Those who run for the entrance find the barricade and surrender. 10 minutes from the first volley to silence. Nathan descends into the gorge. Smoke still hangs thick in the air. Bodies, blood on the rock, horses moving between the fallen. He orders aid for the wounded, for everyone, his men and the enemy both. Corvin looks at him with surprise. Nathan explains, the dead spread no news, the wounded do. He wants the survivors to return to the Count and describe exactly what happened here. 30 peasants in an ambush destroyed 50 soldiers and a battle mage in 10 minutes. 0 casualties on Nathan's side. 3 men lightly scratched by stone shards from a fireball. Corvin stands in the middle of the gorge and says nothing for a moment. Then, quietly, he says he has fought for 30 years and today he saw something for the first time. He says this was not a battle. It was a lesson, and whoever wields this weapon will rule the world. After the gorge, Nathan gains 3 things at once: time, reputation, and a problem that will not shrink on its own. Time, because Count Renaud cannot mount a second expedition immediately. He has lost a third of his garrison. Rebuilding that takes months. Reputation, because the survivors spread the story through every tavern from Haldren to the county. Seat, 30 peasants, no armor, no magic, thunder rods. The problem, now everyone knows. The Count's neighbors know. The merchants carrying news to the capital know. And somewhere in the royal court, someone is listening to every report. The window of silence has closed. From this point on, every move Nathan makes is visible, and his only defense is speed. He invests everything into growth. Mara manages powder production with 3 workers, grinding and mixing 12 hours a day, yielding 40 pounds of gunpowder per week. Nathan forges barrels to a day. Hadrian helps without asking questions. He saw the cart come back from the gorge. He saw the survivors' faces. He knows something permanent has changed in the world, and he accepts it. Corvin recruits and trains without pause. New men arrive each week, 5, 10, sometimes 15. Hunters, former miners, peasants with nothing left to lose. Nathan meets every one of them face to face. By the 8th month, 60 marksmen. By the 9th, 80. By the 10th, 100 musketeers, each with a flintlock, each trained in the volley formation, each capable of hitting a target at 50 paces 7 times in 10 shots. And then Nathan begins to think about the next problem. The musket handles infantry and light cavalry. Against heavy knights in full plate armor, it is less reliable. Against magical shields, it requires concentrated fire. Against walls and fortifications, it does nothing at all. He needs a cannon. He knows the design. Cast bronze or forged iron tube, wheeled carriage, grape shot, or cannonball. The problem is that bronze casting requires equipment he does not have and iron that thick is many. Time's harder to forge than a musket barrel. He thinks about it for 3 days. Then he finds the answer in history, hoop reinforcement. He forges a thinner main barrel and then heats iron rings and fits them around it. As they cool, they contract and grip the barrel like bands on a cask. Additional strength from external pressure rather than a monolithic wall. This is how the first European bombards were built in the 14th century. He spends 10 days on the first cannon, 3-inch caliber, for feet long, 100 pounds, 12 hoops bound from the breech to midpoint, a carriage of oak planks onto wagon wheels. Rough, primitive, but it is a cannon. The test at dawn in a distant ravine, 1 pound of gunpowder, a bag of 20 iron shot the size of fingernails, a wooden shield at 60 paces. The roar shakes leaves from the trees. The recoil throws the carriage back to paces. When the smoke clears, the shield is gone. Splinters are scattered 10 paces in every direction. Corvin stands beside him for a full minute without speaking. Then he asks if they can build another one. Nathan says they can. It will take time and a great deal of iron. Air arrives at the end of the 10th month. No one expected her. A 24-year-old woman, tall, dark hair to her shoulders, a traveling cloak of fine fabric, riding boots, leather gloves. She walks into the mine entrance on foot, alone, without a horse. The guards put 2 muskets on her. She looks at the guns with interest, not fear, interest. The way a scientist examines a mechanism she has not seen before. She introduces herself as Era of the Alphen clan. Elemental mage, water element, 3rd circle. Nathan knows that the 3rd circle is well above average, below archmage, but not by much. He asks why she is here. She says her clan banished her 2 years ago for studying alchemy and mechanics instead of combat. Magic. The Alphen clan has produced combat mages for the royal army for 8 generations. A mage who studies gears instead of spells is a disgrace. She heard rumors of thunder weapons in Haldren. She questioned merchants. She traced the gossip to the hills. She walked for 3 days and followed the cart tracks to the mine entrance. Nathan asks what she wants. She says she wants to understand how it works. Not magic, something else. Something magic cannot explain. And that something interests her more than anything her family ever taught her. Nathan looks at her and sees, with sudden clarity, a version of himself. A person who did not fit the framework of their world and was cast out for it. He tells her the truth. Gunpowder, nitrate, coal, sulfur, a chemical reaction, gas expansion, kinetic energy. She listens without interrupting, eyes burning with it. Then she asks a question that changes everything. She asks whether the barrels can be protected from corrosive magic. Nathan does not understand. She explains, mages can rust iron from a distance, a 3rd circle spell. It turns iron to crumbling rust in seconds. If an archmage determines the gun's design, he will not need fireballs. He will simply rust every barrel at once, and the squad will be holding kindling. Nathan feels something cold move through him. He had not thought of that. He could not, because he did not know the rules of magic in this world. Erin knows those rules, and she knows how to bend them. Certain metal alloys resist magical interference. Certain runes engraved on the surface create a disruption field that slows spells targeting the metal. Not a perfect block, a delay. A corrosion spell that would destroy a plain barrel in 1 second takes a full minute on a protected one. In battle, a minute is an eternity. Nathan extends his hand. Era shakes it. The alliance between the engineer and the mage begins. In 1 month, Era rewires how Nathan thinks about magic entirely. She explains it in terms he can use. Magic is energy moving through a gifted person's body the way electricity moves through wire. Different elements are different frequencies. Fire, high frequency, rapid burst, heavy output over short range. Water, medium frequency, precise and flexible. Earth, low and slow but immovable. Air, variable, unpredictable. A fireball is a directed burst of fiery energy shaped by will, traveling a ballistic arc at roughly 40 paces per second. Range up to 80 paces for a 3rd circle mage, up to 200 for an archmage. Nathan fills page after page in real paper that Era brought with her, tables, comparisons. Fireball range versus musket range, casting speed versus reload speed, mana depletion versus gunpowder cost. A mage exhausts after 20 fireballs and needs an hour to recover. A marksman does not tire. He shoots as long as powder and balls last. One mage, 1,000 marksmen can be trained. A mage requires an innate gift and 20 years of study. A marksman requires 3 weeks and 1 musket. The summary table Nathan compiles in private he calls the Master Table of War. 1/3 circle mage equals roughly 5 musketeers in raw firepower, but the cost ratio is 1 to 1,000. Magic cannot be mass-produced. Gunpowder can. Magic does not lose in raw power. Magic loses in scalability. And Era, listening to his numbers, does not argue. She is smart enough to see what they mean and honest enough to say so. She tells him she now understands why her family feared the knowledge she sought, not because gears are dangerous, because understanding makes magic ordinary, and the ordinary does not grant power. The Rune Protection Project becomes their joint mission. Era experiments with symbols engraved on barrel surfaces, disruption fields that interfere with spells targeting the metal. It works, not perfectly, but enough to matter, and then she proposes something further. She can enchant the bullets, not with fire, with magical penetration. A rune on a lead ball that weakens a magical shield at the point of impact. The first bullet cracks it slightly, the second weakens it further, the third punches through. Instead of 30 ordinary rounds, 3 runic bullets are enough to bring down a mage's shield. Mages have spent 1,000 years perfecting defenses against swords and arrows. They have no experience with a lead ball carrying a penetration rune, no defense, not even a name for the threat. The problem, Aric can produce 10 runic bullets per day. At 100 archers, that is a single drop in a very large bucket. Nathan decides the runic rounds go to specialists, designated marksmen. Deployed against mages only, ordinary soldiers get ordinary bullets. The math works. The 11th month brings an unexpected visitor. A rider on an exhausted horse arrives at the mine entrance at night, covered in road dust from crown to boot sole. He identifies himself as a messenger from King Omar. Nathan takes the sealed letter, reads it once, then again, passes it to Era. She reads it and meets his eyes in silence. The letter is from the king's advisor, written in his own name, but clearly with the king's knowledge. The contents: Omar knows about the gunpowder weapons. Omar knows about the gorge. Omar knows Count Renaud is assembling a major punitive force. The king does not plan to intervene directly, but if the armorer from Haldren wishes to discuss supplying new weapons to the royal army, certain doors might open, certain protections might be arranged. Nathan stands in the night air holding the letter and thinking. Corvin asks what it says. Nathan tells him the king wants to buy the weapons. Corvin asks what he will reply. Nathan says no, not now. Corvin is surprised. Nathan explains, if he sells to the king today, he becomes a supplier, a craftsman in royal service, valuable, but replaceable. They will lock him in a workshop and teach other blacksmiths his methods. And the moment the knowledge is separated from the man, Nathan becomes unnecessary. He does not want to be a supplier. He wants to be the commander, the only person who holds not just the weapons, but the tactics, the doctrine, the full integrated system, the person who cannot be refused because he cannot be replaced. He writes a reply that is polite, evasive, and rich with nothing. He thanks the advisor for the attention. He expresses a willingness to negotiate at some future moment when circumstances are more favorable. The messenger leaves at dawn. Corvin says Nathan is playing with political fire, which is the only kind that cannot be aimed. Nathan replies it is the only kind he is genuinely afraid of. Count Renaud spends 3 months assembling everything he has. He calls in his vassals, hires mercenaries, appeals to a neighboring baron for reinforcement. The result: 200 knights, 100 infantry, 3 mages, 2 of the 3rd circle, 1 of the 4th, 300 warriors in total, aimed at a blacksmith's boy and his peasants in the hills. Ronald has no intention of underestimating his enemy again. He has spoken with the gorge survivors. He knows a narrow pass is suicide. He chooses open ground, the flat plain south of the hills, grass stretching to the horizon. No ravines, no choke points. Knights on open terrain are a force no infantry in this world has survived for 1,000 years. Nathan learns of the approach for days ahead through the scouts Corvin has placed on every road. He calls the full council. The mine's main tunnel is cramped with 120 archers. Corvin, Mara, Era, Davin, now commanding the first company of 40 men. Nathan spreads his map on the table. 3 months of careful surveying, every hill and stream and hollow recorded. He knows the plain as well as he knows the mine. Corvin says open ground means the knights reach them. 200 armored horsemen in a gallop will break any infantry formation in the world. Nathan says it will not break if the formation is right. He tells them about Creasy, the year 1346 on Earth. English archers behind stakes destroyed 12,000 French knights with longbows on a muddy slope. The principle: cavalry is lethal when it reaches its target. Infantry's task is to make sure it never does. He sketches the position: a low hill at the plain's edge with a stream in front, shallow but with boggy banks that will slow horses to a stumble. Beyond the stream, a waist-deep ditch. Beyond the ditch, sharpened stakes driven at angles. Behind the stakes, an earthen rampart of sandbags. Behind the rampart, 3 lines of musketeers. On the hilltop, the cannons. He has built a second, larger gun over the past month. 4-inch caliber, 100 paces of range. Grape shot that sweeps a 10-pace cone of everything living. And across the field in front of the position, buried elbow deep in the earth, barrels of gunpowder with fuses running to the surface. When the cavalry rides over them, the fuses are lit. Nathan did not invent mines. He remembered them. What matters is that no one in Velmer has seen them before. 3 days of preparation, 120 men dig the trench, dry the stakes, fill the sandbags, build the rampart. Era enchants both cannon barrels with corrosion resistance. She prepares 40 runic bullets for Davin snipers, designated for the mages. The morning of the battle arrives gray and cold. Nathan stands on the hill with his spyglass, a magical instrument Era brought from her old life, a gift from her father. He sees Count Renaud at the front of the column, full armor, coat of arms on the shield, the face of a man who has already imagined his victory and is simply riding toward it. Nathan lowers the glass and turns to face his formation. 120 men behind an earthen rampart, 3 ranks of 40, muskets at the shoulder, eyes tight with focus. Corvin walks the line behind them, voice quiet, unhurried. Load on command. Fire on command. Reload on command. 3 weeks of drill so your hands move without your mind's permission. Renaud's army halts 300 paces away and forms up. Knights in front, infantry second, mages behind. The classic arrangement of a force that has won this way for 1,000 years. The knights move at a walk, then a trot. 200 armored horses. The ground trembles. Banners snap in the cold air. A sight that has ended armies across this world without a single arrow fired. Nathan stands. His men stand. Corvin stands. Mara stands beside the powder supply. Era is at Nathan's side, hands glowing fate blue, a water shield ready against fireballs. The first horses hit the stream and bog down. The riders behind press forward, compressing the mass into a knot of confusion at the crossing. Nathan drops his hand. Both cannons fire first. 2 volleys of grape shot tear through the compressed mass of horses and riders at the stream. Iron fragments moving at speeds this world has no experience with. Armor means nothing at that range. The shot punches through and exits the other side. The first musket rank fires, 40 rounds. The second rank fires. The third, reloading. The first again. Smoke covers the entire field. Nathan cannot see through it. He does not need to. 300 musketeers in a line 600 paces wide are firing into a wall of cavalry. Every bullet finds something. The 4-circle mage raises a fire shield and launches a fireball at the rampart. Era blocks it with a water wall. Steam explodes in the air between them like a crack of lightning. Davin and for snipers open with runic bullets. 20 shots, each rifle barrel at 150 paces, 16 strikes. For 5th circle mages lose their shields, to fall, to retreat. 1 mage remains. Dalian, 6th circle. He steps forward alone, arms raised, the air around him turning scorching, the ground beneath him melting. He is preparing the firestorm. Vortigern had said 20 seconds of preparation, 20 seconds standing still. Nathan counts, 1, 2, 3. He shouts to Davin, 1st company, 40 barrels, all runic rounds, 1 target. 40 muskets swing toward Dalian, volley. 40 runic bullets strike a single point in space. The shield holds, but it cracks. 12 seconds, reload. Dalian continues casting, 15th second, 16th, second volley, 40 more runic rounds into the same crack point. The shield bursts, 3 bullets reach Dalian's body. He staggers. The firestorm tears free from his hands, half-formed, uncontrolled, not aimed at the musket lines, but into the open sky above. A pillar of fire shoots 100 meters upward and dissolves into nothing. Stallion falls face first into the earth. The battle lasts 10 more minutes after that. It is not a battle anymore. It is a rout. Knights turn and flee. Infantry drops weapons. Mages retreat under cover, shielding the withdrawal. Nathan orders a ceasefire when the fleeing soldiers reach 200 paces out. Not mercy, calculation. Let them go. Let them carry the story. He descends from the hill. His legs barely hold him. He sits down at the base of the slope and closes his eyes. 120 peasants had just destroyed Count Renaud's army. Nathan's losses, 7 dead, 12 wounded from shrapnel. A single fireball slipped past Ira's shield. Not a single knight reached the rampart. Not one. When Nathan opens his eyes, Count Renaud is kneeling at the foot of the hill in dented armor, his face the color of ash, his eyes completely empty. Nathan walks toward him, looks down for a moment, says nothing. Then he turns and walks away. Corvin stands in the smoke on the field and watches. Then he says quietly that he has fought for 30 years and seen dozens of battles, and today he witnessed an era come to an end. The field of smoke, as people will call it later, changes Nathan's world in a single night. By the end of 2 days, the news has reached every corner of the county. In a week, the whole kingdom knows. In a month, the continent. 300 soldiers and 3 mages destroyed by a peasant militia. Count Renaud on his knees. Not a single knight having reached the enemy lines. People retell the story with each retelling larger and more terrifying. But the survivors confirm the core of it every time. Smoke, a roar, iron rods that kill from a distance without magic, a formation that does not break. Nathan lets Renaud go. A dead count becomes a martyr. A living, humiliated count becomes a warning that no one needs written down. He sends a message to King Omar through Renaud's own surviving riders, short and clear. He is no rebel. He claims no land, no title. He wants one thing, the status of free commander with the right to raise his own army and negotiate with the crown as a force negotiates with a force, not as a peasant before a lord. The letter is bold. Nathan knows it. He also knows that after the field of smoke, Omar has no other choice. Refuse, and Nathan becomes a rallying point for every discontent on the continent. Accept, and the crown gains the one ally whose weapons no one else possesses. Omar is not a fool. Nathan is counting on that. While the reply travels, Nathan builds. The mine is too small now. He moves operations to Count Renaud's abandoned estate. The servants fled. The steward fled to the capital. Nathan does not loot the place. He becomes the new authority in it. Peasants from surrounding villages arrive on their own and ask who they should pay taxes to now. Nathan says there are no taxes. There's work. Whoever works gets paid in silver every week. He hires 100 men, half for construction, barracks, workshops, warehouses, a proper shooting range, half for production or mining, iron smelting, barrel forging, powder making, bullet casting. Mara takes charge of powder production. 20 workers, 10 full-cycle saltpeter pits, a mill on the stream for grinding. Output, 300 pounds of gunpowder per week. She develops a granulation system that produces powder of consistent quality and invents a testing method so simple it requires no instruments, a measured track of powder on a smooth board. Light one end, count heartbeats until the other end catches. To slow, rejected. To fast, dangerous, between 2 and 3 heartbeats, ideal. Nathan watches her run the test and thinks that on Earth, someone would have applied for a patent on this method. Hadrian works the forge every day, 70 years old and not complaining. He has seen what his adopted son has become, and he has accepted it without a word. He teaches the 5 young blacksmiths Nathan assigned to him how to read metal, where it is ready, where it is overheated, where the seam is weak. His hands know things no blueprint can explain. Era works on runic protection. She enchants every barrel in the growing arsenal. 120 muskets to cannons, 3 runes of resistance each. Half an hour per rune, 6 hours a day until she collapses from exhaustion every evening. Nathan watches her work and knows this cannot scale. He tells her they need a mass method. Era thinks for a week, then she suggests the rune stamp, an iron plate with the rune pattern engraved into it. Heat it, press it to the barrel. The rune imprints and activates in the heat. 70% as strong as hand engraved, but 10 barrels an hour instead of 2 per day. Nathan embraces her without thinking, not romantically, the way a man embraces the solution to a problem that has been costing him sleep. Era freezes for a second, then steps back and says she needs more iron for the stamps. He laughs. It is the best sound he has made in months. The king's reply arrives 6 weeks later, not by messenger alone, but with a full delegation. 12 horsemen, the advisor, 2 scribes, 8 guards, and 1 archmage. Nathan stands at the estate gate and watches the column approach. Corvin and 20 musketeers stand in formation behind him. Era at his left, Mara in the workshop doorway. The archmage dismounts first. Old, tall and thin, white hair to the shoulders, plain gray robe, eyes like the pieces of winter ice. Vortigern, 6th circle, one of the 7 most powerful mages in the kingdom, 70 years old, and capable of reducing the entire estate to ash with a single spell. Vortigern does not speak publicly. He asks for a private conversation. Corvin objects. He says the archmage could kill Nathan with a thought. Nathan says that if Vortigern wanted him dead, 20 musketeers would not change that outcome. The 6th circle operates on a different level. He agrees to the meeting. They sit in the former steward's office, a desk, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the yard where the musketeers stand at attention. Vortigern is silent for a long time. Then he begins to speak, and nothing about it is what Nathan expected. No threats, no arrogance. He speaks quietly, almost warily, like a man who has carried a weight for 70 years and has finally found someone worth putting it down in front of. He says he knows what gunpowder is. Nathan goes very still. Vortigern continues. 1,000 years ago, he says, there was a civilization on Velmer. Not a magical one, a technological one. They built machines. They drew energy from the earth. They made weapons that erased cities in moments. They knew no magic. They knew science. And science led them to war. Not just war, the final war, 30 years long. When it ended, Velmer was scorched earth and poisoned water and dead forests. The population had shrunk tenfold. From the ruins, the mages rose. The rare gifted survivors gathered and made a pact. The first 7 archmages, their decision, technology is the path to extinction. Magic would be the sole power, deliberately, not because mages are superior, but because mages are controllable, a gift from birth, rare. A war of mages means hundreds of deaths. A war of technology means millions. The pact sealed it all away, not with a single spell, but with a system. The magical aristocracy was constructed intentionally. The blacksmith guilds were allowed to forge swords and horseshoes, but never to go further. And anyone who rediscovered the old path would be destroyed. Nathan listens and feels something cold tighten in his chest. He was not the first. Vortigern confirms it plainly. Over 1,000 years, 7 others came before Nathan. Souls from elsewhere, carrying the same knowledge. All 7 were found. 6 were killed. 1 went mad after being shown the ruins of the civilization that ended itself. Nathan asks what pulled them here. Vortigern says that beneath Velmer lies the remnant of that lost civilization. Not machines or weapons, but memory. The collective consciousness of the engineers and scientists who died in the last war, seeking a guide who will carry their work forward. But every time, the path ends the same way. Gunpowder, weapons, war, destruction, a cycle. Nathan sits in silence, and the pieces fit together with a sound like a vault locking. The testing ground, the flash, the darkness, waking up in Aric's body, not an accident, a selection. But Vortigern says Nathan is different from the previous 7. The others came and built weapons. Only weapons, as fast as possible, as many as possible, pointed at every enemy. Nathan started the same way, but he built something else alongside the weapons, a system. Industry, training, discipline, tactics, supply chains. He was not building a tool for killing. He was building a structure that defends. And Nathan knows something the other 7 did not. He has seen what unchecked progress does. He has seen the world wars. He has seen Hiroshima. He knows the price of every step forward when no one is watching where the steps lead. Vortigern looks him in the eyes and asks simply what Nathan plans to do next. Build cannons until the continent drowns in blood, or find another way. Nathan does not answer immediately. He sits in silence for 3 full minutes. Then he speaks. He says he knows where unchecked progress leads better than anyone on this continent. He has seen the Earth after the world wars. He knows what nuclear weapons look like. He knows how technology transforms from a tool of freedom into a machine of total control. He does not want that. But the 1,000-year pact is not working either. A magical aristocracy is 1,000 years of stability built on the bones of commoners. Peasants without rights, without voice, without any path forward. Magic does not protect them. Magic holds them in place. Vortigern does not argue. He nods. He knows. Nathan says he is proposing a third way. Not magic against technology. Magic and technology together, each serving as a check on the other. Mages watch gunpowder. Gunpowder watches mages. Neither side can destroy the other. A balance held not by force or secrecy, but by mutual dependence. Vortigern listens. Then he says it sounds beautiful, and asks who will control the controllers. Nathan says that is exactly the right question, and that answering it will take a very long time. Vortigern rises. He extends his hand. Nathan takes it. An archmage of 70 years, an engineer in a blacksmith's body, 2 eras in a single handshake. Vortigern says he will report to the king that the armorer from Haldren is dangerous, but reasonable, that he could be reasoned with. This is not an alliance, he says. Not yet. It is a truce. Nathan accepts. A truce is enough to keep building. The delegation leaves the next morning, and with them goes a document. Official royal recognition of Nathan as commander of a free company. The right to recruit up to 300 men. Direct subordination to the crown, bypassing the earls and barons. Not everything Nathan wanted, enough for the next step. For 2 years, he does not fight. He builds. The royal recognition gives him breathing room that he uses without wasting a single day. 3 forges working without pause. 20 blacksmiths forging barrels to Nathan's blueprints, while Hadrian walks behind them with his old voice and his 70 years of instinct, correcting what the drawings cannot say. Mare's powder operation becomes a factory, 50 workers, 20 saltpeter pits, 3 mills, 1,000 pounds of gunpowder per week. Safety protocols that Nathan recognizes as the standard practice of 18th century gunpowder. Factories, arrived at independently by a woman who has never heard the word factory. Aric trains for young mages, weak talents, first and second circles, overlooked by the aristocracy and found among peasant children. She teaches them the rune stamp process. Working in shifts, the four produce 40 protected barrels a day. The arsenal grows faster than Nathan can count. By the end of the second year of peace, he has 300 musketeers in 3 companies. Davin commands the first, a former street orphan now leading 40 of the best shots in the unit. Precise and relentless, Corvin has developed a 4-week training program that takes a peasant and produces a marksman with working formation instincts and a steady trigger. At the start of the 3rd year, Nathan begins work on the rifled barrel. Spiral grooves cut inside the bore, spinning the bullet along its axis and stabilizing its flight. Range and accuracy triple on Earth. Rifling existed by the 15th century, but only became widespread in the 19th. Here it exists because one engineer remembered it. The tool he designs is a drawn iron rod with a cutting edge that rotates a quarter turn with each. Pass through the bore. 20 passes for grooves. A barrel that sends a bullet 150 paces and hits a man-sized target. 4 times in 5. Corvin holds the first rifled musket and says quietly that this is no longer an infantry weapon. It is a killer's weapon. Nathan agrees. The rifled barrels go to specialist marksmen, 1 per 10 soldiers. Mass production is too slow to equip the entire unit, 1 per day against 5 smoothbore barrels. The artillery grows to 8 guns, for light cannons for field deployment. The heavy siege bombards, 2 mortars for arcing fire over walls. The mortar fires a cast iron shell on an arcing path. The shell clears the wall and falls inside the fortress. On Earth, mortars made castles obsolete. In Velmer, castles are the foundation of the aristocracy's power. Nathan is building the tool that will make them irrelevant. By the end of the 3rd year, his army stands at 1,200 men, 1,000 musketeers in 10 companies, 200 artillery and support personnel, 8 cannons. A supply train loaded for 3 months of independent operations. And then war chooses him. 3 of the great eastern houses of Velmer unite against the gunpowder threat. Duke Malarin, Marquis Dressig, Count Hugh Lane. Together they muster for 1,000 knights and 30 mages, including 5 of the 5th Circle and 1 of the 6th. They send an ultimatum to King Omar. Hand over the armor Nathan or face war. Omar summons Nathan to the capital, their first meeting in person. The throne room, marble, silk banners, courtiers arranged for effect. Omar studies Nathan from his throne, a thin man in a plain uniform, no coat of arms, no crown, No magic, hands calloused from a forge. The king says 3 great houses are mobilizing, and his own knights are the few and his mages, outnumbered 3-1. Nathan says 1,200 musketeers and 8 cannons will stop for 1,000 knights. Omar asks on what terms. Nathan lists them clearly: supreme command of the combined army, complete freedom in tactics, after victory, permanent status as military advisor to the crown with the right to maintain his armed forces, and the repeal of every law prohibiting commoners from bearing arms. Omar is silent for a long moment. Then he agrees. He has no alternative, and both of them know it. The army of the 3 houses takes the field at the beginning of the 4th year. 4,000 knights, 1,000 infantry, 30 battle mages, banners of a military tradition that has ruled this world without challenge for a millennium. 2 days before the engagement, Vortigern arrives alone, in plain traveling clothes. Without his robe, he cannot openly fight on Nathan's side. The treaty between archmages forbids it, but he can offer intelligence. The 6th circle mage on the opposing side is named Dalian. His weakness, the firestorm, requires 20 seconds of preparation, during which he stands completely still and unshielded. He cannot cast the shield and the storm simultaneously, one or the other, a choice. Nathan files it away. 20 seconds. He selects the battlefield, a plain by the Karen River, wide and open, but bounded on the left by the river and on the right by forest. The front is 3,000 paces long. No outflanking, only a frontal assault across ground Nathan controls. 3 days of positioning, 1,200 musketeers in for ranks of 300, 8 guns onto ridges, for left, for right. The trench, the stakes, the sandbag rampart, the same design as the field of smoke, refined and scaled up. Across the field, buried elbow deep, barrels of gunpowder with fuses running to the surface. When cavalry rides over them, the fuses are lit. Nathan did not invent the mine. He remembered it. Era enchants both cannon barrels. She prepares 40 runic bullets for Davin's designated snipers, targets, the mages. Mara stands by the powder wagon, face pale, hands steady. Every minute, a porter runs from the wagon to the lines with fresh powder and ball. An unbroken conveyor through the smoke and noise of the largest battle in Velmer's living memory. The morning comes gray and cold. The army of the 3 houses forms half a league to the east. Banners, gleaming plate, white horses under mages in bright robes. The last spectacle of a 1,000-year tradition. The bugle sounds on the enemy's side. 2,000 horsemen in the first wave. Walk, trot, gallop. The ground shakes, 800 paces out, 600, 400, 300. The mortars fire first. To cast iron shells arc into the compressed mass of riders. Explosions of earth and shrapnel. Gaps in the ranks. The horses shudder, but the mass presses on. 200 paces. Light cannons open with grape shot. Horses fold over. Riders are launched. But 4,000 is too many. The mass swallows the losses and keeps moving. 150 paces. The front horses reach the buried charges. Nathan nods. Mara lights the fuses. 3 seconds. 12 barrels burst simultaneously. Fountains of earth and fire rising under the charge. Horses rear and throw their riders. The cavalry formation breaks apart. A wall of smoke and panic separating the front from the rear. 100 paces. First rank fires. 300 bullets. Second rank. Third. 900 rounds in 30 seconds. Smoke covers the field entirely. Nathan cannot see the enemy. He does not need to. 300 musketeers in a line 600 paces wide, firing into an oncoming wall of men and horses. It is not possible to miss. The 5th circle mages activate. 10 of them raise shields and unleash firestorms against the musket lines. 3 strikes miss. They hit the left flank. 10 musketeers burn in an instant. Aric casts a water wall over the flank, to lay for the first strike, in time for the second. Davin and 20 riflemen open with runic rounds. 150 paces. 16 of 20 shots connect, for 5th circle shields collapse. The mages fall dead. To retreat wounded. Dalian steps forward alone, arms raised. The air around him turns scorching. The ground beneath his feet begins to melt. The firestorm is coming. Nathan counts. 1, 2, 3. Vortigern said 20 seconds. He shouts to Davin. First company, all runic rounds, 40 barrels. 1 target. The first volley strikes Dalian's shield and it cracks but holds. 12 seconds. Reload. The count continues. 15 second. 16th. Second volley, 40 runic rounds into the same crack point. The shield shatters, 3 bullets reach Dalian's body. He staggers. The firestorm tears free from his hands, wild, uncontrolled, aimed at nothing. And a pillar of fire shoots 100 meters into the sky and burns out against the cold air. Dalian falls. 10 more minutes and the battle is over. The knights turn and run. The infantry throws down their weapons. The mages cover the retreat. Nathan orders ceasefire at 200 paces out. Let them carry the story home. Let every road out of this valley carry the news of what happened by the Karen River today. He descends from the hill, sits down in the grass at the base of the slope, closes his eyes. 1,200 peasants, 8 cannons, 7 dead in the field of smoke. Now, against 4,000 knights and 30 mages, are route in under an hour. The continent absorbs the news in 3 weeks. Then it speaks all at once. Duke Malaran sends an envoy, not with an army this time, with a peace offer. Marquis Dressic flees to a neighboring kingdom and requests asylum. Count Hulain surrenders his castle to King Omar voluntarily. 3 great houses that had dictated terms to kings for 1,000 years have capitulated to a man, without a title and without magic. Nathan does not celebrate. He sits in his tent by the Karen River and stares at the field where the bodies have been cleared and the ground is black with powder and blood. Aric comes in quietly and sits beside him. They stay like that for a long time without speaking. Then Nathan says that in his world, battles like this one were beginnings, not endings. That after gunpowder came larger cannons, then machine guns, then bombs, then weapons that could end entire cities in a single moment. Every step forward in that progression seemed like the last. None of them ever were. Aric asks if he is afraid that Velmer will follow the same path. Nathan says yes. He is afraid. But there is a difference here. On Earth, there was no force capable of balancing technology from within. Here there is. Mages and engineers, 2 poles. If the system between them is built correctly, they will hold each other without needing to destroy each other. Aric places her hand on his. She says nothing. Nathan does not pull his hand away. The 4th year belongs to diplomacy. Nathan does not fight. He travels from capital to capital, palace to palace, in his plain uniform with his blacksmith's hands and his engineer's eyes. Kings who would not have seated him at their tables a year ago now listen to him in formal chambers, with their advisors present. He says the same thing everywhere. The age of knights is over. The age of the magical monopoly is over. One can accept this and build something new from it, or one can deny it and be swept away when the technology spreads, and it will spread. Gunpowder cannot be forgotten. His proposal, a continental treaty, gunpowder production permitted but controlled, supervised by a council of mages, engineers, and crown representatives, a new regular army replacing the noble militia in every kingdom, with commoners gaining rights through service, the magical aristocracy retaining its status but losing its monopoly on force. Not everyone agrees. The western kingdoms refuse. 3 southern dukes declare him a heretic. The church excommunicates him. Nathan does not react. He waits. Within 6 months, the western kingdoms attempt to build their own powder weapons using a stolen recipe. They produce muskets without runic protection, without proper metallurgy, without ballistic calculation. 3 barrels detonate during testing. 2 gunners are killed. They send representatives to Nathan 6 months after that, not with demands, with a request. The principle Nathan built from the first day has proven itself. A gunpowder recipe without metallurgy is useless. Metallurgy without ballistics is useless. Ballistics without runic protection is useless. The full cycle only works as a whole, and the whole lies in the mind of one man. He does not refuse them. He offers the same terms he offered everyone: a contract, a council, oversight, equality. They sign. The 5th year, the final year of this story, Nathan stands in the hall of the Continental Council, a new circular building in Omar's capital. Stone walls, high ceilings, light coming in from windows cut high in the stone. 12 people at the table, the 7 kings of Velmer. Vortigern representing the magical order. 2 representatives of the blacksmith guilds, Nathan and Aric. They are signing the Karen Treaty, named for the battle that changed everything. 32 articles. Gunpowder production under council supervision. Armories established in every kingdom. The magical order retaining autonomy, but joining the military council. Commoners gaining the right to military service and civic status. The blacksmith guilds reformed and integrated with engineering knowledge. Nathan is the last to sign. He looks at the line at the bottom of the parchment for a moment. Then he writes, Aric of Haldren. Not Nathan, Aric. He made that choice long ago. Nathan died on a testing ground in another world. Aric was born in a smithy on this one. Aric is who changed it. Vortigern approaches afterward. The old archmage looks tired in the way of a man who has lived long enough to see the same mistake. Made 7 times and is not sure whether the 8th time will be different. He says 7 people came before Aric carrying the same knowledge. All 7 chose war. Only war. Aric is the first to choose peace after the war. Aric replies that he did not choose peace. He chose balance. Peace, he says, was a side effect. Vortigern smiles. He says that for a side effect, it is not bad. That evening, Aric steps out onto the balcony of the council building. Below him, the city spreads out in lantern light, smoke from chimneys, the sound of people going about the business of their lives. Aric comes to stand beside him without announcing herself. She takes his hand without asking. She simply takes it. He does not pull away. She asks what comes next. He says what comes next is the hardest part. Building a world where gunpowder and magic do not destroy each other, decade by decade, choice by choice. Aric says that sounds like a lifetime's work. Aric says he has a life. One ended at the firing range. The second is just beginning. Far to the south, in the Haldren smithy, old Hadrian sits alone beside a forge gone cold. His hands rest on his knees, large, calloused. The hands of a man who bent iron for 60 years and asked no questions about the extraordinary things happening in his basement. On the wall before him hangs a single object, an iron tube strapped to a wooden stock with leather strips and wire, rough, crooked, built in 3 days by a sick boy who should not have survived his fever. The first musket in the history of Velmer. Hadrian looks at it for a long time. Then he smiles the quiet smile of a man who trusted without understanding and was not wrong to do so. On the workbench beside him lies a newspaper. The first newspaper ever printed on Velmer, set on a press that Mara built from Aric's blueprints. The front page, in letters large enough for a man with old eyes to read. The Karen Treaty has been signed. The age of gunpowder and magic begins. Below the headline, a portrait, a young man in a plain uniform, hands of a blacksmith, eyes of an engineer. The caption reads, Aric of Haldren, Supreme Commander, Architect of the New World. Hadrian folds the newspaper slowly. He sets it down beside the first musket. Then he stands. He walks to the forge. He bends down and stokes the coals until they begin to glow again. He places an iron ingot in the heat. He picks up his hammer, and he begins to forge, because that is what he knows, and that is what he has always done. And the world outside the walls of his smithy is a different world now, and it is enough. An engineer arrived in a dying boy's body and asked one question that the aristocracy of 1,000 years had never thought to ask. What if power does not have to be born into you? What if it can be built? The answer took 5 years, a dozen battles, and a handful of people who had nothing to lose and chose to build something anyway. Mara, who could not read but understood the chemistry of powder better than any scholar in the kingdom by the end of the 2nd year. Corvin, who had lost an arm to magic and used what remained to train the soldiers who proved magic, was not invincible. Davin, who went from stealing bread behind a market to commanding the company that brought down a 6th-circle archmage. Hadrian, who asked no questions, boarded up the basement window and trusted the stranger, wearing his son's face to know what he was doing. Era, who walked for 3 days through the hills alone to find a man who thought the way she thought, and who made every barrel in the arsenal resistant to the one force that should have destroyed everything. And Aric, who carried 35 years of another man's knowledge into a world that had forgotten science existed, and chose, when he had the power to simply conquer, to build a balance instead. Not because he was certain it would hold, because he knew what happens when nothing does. The Karen Treaty is 32 articles on a piece of parchment, and it is also the first document in Velmer's history that was signed by a king and a blacksmith's apprentice as equals. That will matter more than any battle. Treaties are fragile, but the precedent of equals signing together is harder to erase than a name on a page. Gunpowder cannot be uninvented. Vortigern's first 7 archmages understood this the hard way after the last war. The second pact, the one built not on suppression but on balance, carries no guarantee of permanence, only the guarantee that both sides now need each other too much to destroy the other without destroying themselves. That is not peace. Aric was right about that. It is equilibrium, and equilibrium requires maintenance every day, in every negotiation, in every decision about who gets to hold a gun and who is responsible for what it does. Aric knows this better than anyone, because he has seen what happens on a world that had no magic to serve as a counterweight, only technology pushing against itself until something broke. He does not intend to let this world make the same discoveries. In the city below the balcony, lanterns are being lit in the windows, smiths are at their forges, children are running in the streets. A press somewhere is printing the morning edition of Velmer's first newspaper. 2 years ago, none of those things existed in this form. A press, a newspaper, the idea that information could travel faster than a horse. 5 years ago, a boy named Aric had no future, no coin, no guild membership, and no magic, and the world saw no reason to give him any of those things. What the world did not account for was the engineer already living behind those gray eyes, counting the seconds between the fireballs on the horizon and calculating what it would take to change everything. He had the formula memorized. 75, 15, 10. What no one could have predicted, not Renaud, not Omar, not even Vortigern with his 1,000-year perspective, was that the most important thing Aric built in 5 years was not the musket, and not the cannon, and not the treaty. It was the idea that people born without the gift are not lesser, that a girl who cannot read can still outthink a guild chemist, that a one-armed mercenary can train a better soldier than a knight born to the sword, that a vagabond with nothing to lose can become a captain worth following into battle. That was the weapon the aristocracy never saw coming. Not the powder, the belief. In the smithy in Haldren, the forge is lit again, and the hammer falls with the steady rhythm of a man who has done this 10,000 times and will do it 10,000 more. Outside, the world is changing, not all at once, not without pain, not without the long and difficult work of keeping a balance that wants to tip. But it is changing, and it will not go back. Nathan died on a testing ground with a jammed bolt and a flash of white light and 35 years of engineering knowledge stored in a mind that the world of Velmer would have let rot in a backwater smithy. Aric lived, and Aric, standing on a balcony in a capital that 1 year ago would not have let him through its front gate, holding the hand of a mudge who chose gears over spells, is looking at the lights of a city that is finally, slowly, learning that power does not only belong to the gifted, it belongs to anyone willing to understand why things work, and repeat it, and teach it to the next person standing at the door with nothing but time and a head and hands. Saltpeter, coal, sulfur, iron, physics, 5 years, one world, changed. That is where this story ends, but it is not where the work ends. The forge is still burning in Haldren. Mara's mills are still running. Ira's rude stamps are pressing symbols in the hot iron in 3 different kingdoms. Corvin is somewhere on a road between cities, training the next company of men who will never have to kneel before anyone who was simply born luckier than them. Davin is writing orders in the hand of a man who learned to read at 20, which is late by any measure and exactly on time by his. And Vortigern, at 72 years old, is sleeping in a carriage on the road back to the magical order to deliver a report that will be the strangest document in 1,000 years of Archmage history. The report will say, the 8th candidate arrived. He was a weapons engineer. He built weapons. Then he chose something more difficult. He chose a world where both kinds of power have to answer to each other. Whether it holds will not be determined in a throne room or on a battlefield. It will be determined in 1,000 ordinary decisions made by ordinary people who now hold the tools to make them. That is the bet Aric placed. Not on kings, not on mages, not on the treaty. On people. On Mara counting heartbeats beside a powder track and knowing when the batch is right. On Tor, who fell to his knees on the first day thinking he was watching magic, and learned to fire 3 volleys a minute in 2 weeks and never knelt before anything again. On the peasants, who came to the hills because someone was paying silver and stayed because something there felt like a future. On Hadrian, who stoked his forge one more time because the world had changed, but iron was still. Iron and the hammer still fell true. The balance will not hold itself. Nothing worth keeping ever does. But tonight, on a balcony above a lit city, with the cold river air coming off the Cairn Valley and the smell of coal smoke drifting up from 1,000 chimneys, Aric of Haldren is not thinking about what could go wrong. He is thinking about what just went right, for the first time into lives. He is thinking about a boy who died on a testing ground and woke up with calluses on his hands and a formula in his head and no coin to his name and no gift from any god. He is thinking about how the first musket sounded in the dark of the courtyard, not a roar, not a thunderclap, just a dull dry pop and a hole of fingers deep in a stone wall, and how that was enough, that small, improbable, sulfur-smelling pop was enough to start the unraveling of 1,000 years. Not because it was powerful, because it was repeatable, because any person with a head and hands could do it. The lanterns burn below. Hadrian's hammer rings out once in the distance, carried on the night air from Huldren to the capital like a last note held long after the music has ended. Air does not speak. Nathan, Aric, does not speak. The city breathes beneath them. There are things ahead that will be hard. Decades of maintenance for a balance that will strain every year under the weight of ambition and fear and the simple human tendency to want more than equilibrium allows. There will be crises. There will be men who try to break the treaty the moment it no longer benefits them, and they will need to be reminded of the Cairn River in terms they cannot ignore. There will be discoveries Nathan has not made yet, and some of them will be dangerous, and the system he built will have to grow to contain them. There will be a morning when someone fires a new kind of weapon, and the world has to decide, again, what kind of balance it wants to hold. Aric knows all of this. He is an engineer. Engineers see the load-bearing points before the structure fails. He is also a man standing on a balcony at the end of the longest 5 years of 2 lives. And for one moment, he is not calculating anything. He is just here, in this body that is his now, that earned its calluses and its scars building something that had never existed in this world before. A second life, an improbable one, built from saltpeter scraped off old cellar walls and iron hammered into shape by borrowed hands. The Cairn Treaty is signed. The forge is burning. The newspaper is printed, and somewhere in the hills north of Huldren, the first saltpeter pit they ever dug, the one Nathan sketched on a clay tablet in his second night in this world, is still producing crystals, slow and steady, the way all the important things accumulate, layer by layer, season by season. The age of gunpowder and magic begins not with a proclamation, but with a handshake and a newspaper and an old blacksmith who stokes his forge because that is what he knows how to do. And with a woman who counts heartbeats next to a powder track because that is the most reliable instrument available, and it turns out to be enough. And with a one-armed sergeant on a road somewhere, his voice carrying over a field of recruits who did not know 3 weeks ago that they had the capacity to stand in formation and hold. And with a mudge who walked 3 days through the hills because she wanted to understand something her family told her she was not supposed to want. This is how eras end and begin, not in a single moment. In 1,000 small irreversible choices made by people who decided the world they were born into was not the only one available. Aric of Huldren signed his name at the bottom of the parchment and put down the pen. The ink dried. The seal was pressed. The treaty was real. The second life, the one that began with vomiting on an earthen floor in a blacksmith's workshop, with someone else's hands and no plan except to not panic, was just beginning in earnest. And it was enough, more than enough, to make it worth waking up.